Hello and welcome to Brand and Becoming. I'm Keisha Sheikh and I help founders and senior leaders turn their experience into visible authority that attracts opportunities. This podcast is all about the journey behind the success, the pivots, the decisions and the moments that shape who you become. Today I'm joined by Chris Howard. Chris has spent over 20 years scaling businesses, raising capital and working across different industries and countries. What stood out to me about Chris is how he's built success without following a linear path and how he's leaned into his strengths to create opportunities across completely different environments. So let me welcome Chris in. Hi Chris, how are you?
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. It's a nice sunny day in London.
Yeah, it makes all the difference, doesn't it? So we'll get started. And for anyone, I know a lot of people already know who you are, but for those that don't know you, are you able to let people know a little bit about who you are and what it is that you're doing today?
It's very kind of you saying a lot of people know me. I think most people don't know me. But I have had a long career, which I started actually in fashion, in clothing, and moved into luxury goods, into watches and jewellery, and then did a pivot into precious metals. And then more recently, through one reason or another, which I'll go into later on in this call, into cleantech. And it's been a fascinating journey. It's taken me across different industries at a senior level, right up to board and executive level, and 6, maybe 7 countries.
Wow.
And it's not all been easy, and it's not all been straightforward. But it's been fascinating, and I'm still firing on all 4 pistons.
Love that. And like you say, you've had such a various career, but also I suppose had to pivot a lot of times and probably been thrown right at the deep end a lot of the times as well, which I think can only make you strong, but also more well-rounded and be able to know what to do in different situations and have that experience too as well.
Yes, I think, if I started off at my early career, I would have gone, right, I'm going to be in a fashion business. That's what I'm going to do. Why was that? Because I was brought up within a fashion business. My parents my father had a fashion company, and my grandfather was a retailer, and so that was natural. That's what I was going to do, and I couldn't think of anything else I was going to do at the age of 25. That was my future. And circumstances changed, and back in those days, there wasn't an online business. It just didn't exist. So it was the old school. But also, we all change, we adapt, and things that we suddenly find we're good at and we're not so good at, we tend to play to those strengths. And layered into that was, personal experiences where you get divorced, you change, you move, you meet someone else. And that took me and my wife to different countries. So suddenly opportunities arise, and you're really left with the question is, do I keep on going down this same path? Or do I pivot into something and really leverage my skills? And can I do that? It's having the confidence to do that. And that's what, surprisingly, I did twice. And I don't know if I'm going to do it again, but it's definitely brought a lot of pluses.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I suppose even opened your eyes up to and having those real life experiences of doing different things has been cool, I can imagine as well. So when you moved out of fashion, was that intentional? Was it circumstances, or how did that opportunity come about to move out of fashion?
Well, I went into fashion early on. Literally at the age of 18, I was selling raincoats in Burberry's in Paris.
Wow.
Sounds very glamorous, but I was on the shop floor in Burberry's. I speak French, and it was pretty difficult selling what's the equivalent today of a £2,000 raincoat in French. But it was, it was fascinating at that time, and I very luckily moved off the shop floor into the buying offices. And I said I did have a background in fashion from a family point of view, and as a result of that, I ended up working for some pretty cool businesses at the time in the mid-90s for Calvin Klein underwear, and that was the time of Marky Mark and Kate Moss, and it was flying. And we can come to that later on as regarding brands and how you can damage brands. But I think after a while I realized, I've had enough of this. Fashion is very dog eat dog, and it's pretty cutthroat. And naively, I thought, well, some other industries are less cutthroat and whatever. So I thought, well, I think circumstances came up that I made that change from fashion into jewelry, and actually there wasn't that much of a difference. It was not a pivot because you're dealing with the same retailers, you're dealing with the same market. But the market was changing massively as well. And when I meant the market, I'm talking about the landscape. So having been a wholesale business, suddenly there was a new element that was arriving, which was online.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it makes me sound very old, but that was a real question at the time. People were asking, seriously, is this going to work or not? Are
Yeah.
people actually going to buy stuff online? And that was the big debate, working for people like Calvin Klein and then for some of the other brands as well. Anyway, I got the opportunity to move into jewelry, but the challenges were pretty similar. You're dealing with the same retail theories and groups and everything. And so that really took me through my first half of my career.
Okay.
And with two of those, where we can talk a little bit about where you find your value, is one of those companies was Guess Europe. And by this stage, I'd already moved away from fashion into the jewelry, but it's a fashion company. Guess Jeans is a fashion company. And at that time, back in 2010, the business wanted to build a new jewelry business, a global jewelry business. And, in that respect, we did that, and they were ambitious, like any large corporation, wanted to build a 200-300 million euro business quickly, fast, do it now. And I thrived in that market, but I'd never actually done that before.
Yeah.
And based in Switzerland, because that's where the European head office was, literally sat there and going, right, how do we do this? We worked with designers, but also building the sales and the commercial team, leveraging the brand and building that across the world in 46 different markets.
Yeah.
And after 4 years, I thought, well, we've done this. I mean, it was fantastic. The one thing about the fashion business, and I don't know if it's changed now, this is going back, there's one thing, we all used to live by the quarter.
Yeah.
So you would only be surviving by the quarter, especially in American fashion business. It's cutthroat. So if you haven't achieved the numbers and your figures and thing by quarter, then there's a risk of you leaving. And somehow I managed to get through all of that. But I decided to move over the mountains to Zurich to work for Swarovski on developing a new brand for them within jewelry, which was an emerging brand that we worked on called Lola and Grace. One of the things that really I came to realize, without actually realizing it myself at the time, that I was really good at this. And it was almost reflecting afterwards, going, right, why am I good at this? Because I think I'd focused on one area, which is my commercial skills in actually scaling this. And I hadn't been to the school, hadn't done it, but I realized where to do it, how to leverage that brand. And that is something that I've held on to ever since, in leveraging in different industries. We can talk about pivoting to Royal Mint and then into cleantech. It's having those fundamental belief and that value for me around commercial ability and leveraging it. And I didn't realize that at Guess Jewelry at all. And until afterwards, when somebody said to me, that's why we recruited you, because you did this. So I guess everyone has that.
Yeah. I was going to say, sometimes it takes someone actually saying it to you, doesn't it, to notice that, oh, that doesn't maybe come naturally to everyone, or not everyone is skilled at that, or actually that is one of a strength of mine. And I know you recently kind of posted about playing to your strengths, and I know you and I in conversation you've talked around it, and it's so important because not everyone even realizes what their strengths are. But if you're always trying to do everything and be everything but not knowing where your strengths are, you're going to make it a lot harder for yourself. And we all have got different personality traits, skills, things that come easier to us versus somebody else. What would you say now? I know you kind of touched on it briefly, but what are your core strengths and how did you become clear on them? Was it that person saying it to you? Did you have to do any exercises after that, or how did you get really clear on what your strengths are and kind of really work with that, but capitalize on it by kind of the next opportunities that you went for?
It's a good question. And I'm going to take you back to my early career, very early again.
Yeah.
where I remember my dad, and I was speaking to my dad. I was very ambitious, 20-something-year-old, probably a bit obnoxious and arrogant. But I remember saying to my dad, what I want to be when I'm 40, 45. I want to be a CEO. I want to be a managing director. I want to be running a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to me, but why don't you just do what you're good at? You're a salesman. And I was like, no, I'm not. For me, it was an offense. In the
Yeah.
US, you can get away with that. The US is seen as something. It's a big deal. It's like that's what you play with. For me, it was not an insult, but it was no. I'm better than that. I'm bigger than that, and I think I blocked that off for a number of years. Even though my career developed and I went to senior management and I fulfilled what I wanted to do, my core expertise, the one thing I was really good at, was relationship management, making things happen, not just selling that raincoat in that department store at the age of 18, but I was good at doing that and good with people and building those relationships. And so if I step back and realize that is my core expertise and that can be transferred.
Yeah.
And I realized I'd done that well when I was at Guess Jeans or Guess Jewelry and at Swarovski. And interestingly, when I moved from Swarovski and went back to the UK for a while and randomly got approached for a job which was a little out of the blue, to go and interview for the Royal Mint. What I found was, without knowing why they would want to be interested in me, it was because they were looking for somebody who knew could work in the consumer industry and had a real ability to build relationships, etc. Blah blah blah. So it was that underneath that value that I brought was actually being able to scale that business. So I didn't realize that. Nobody actually said that to me early on. And it's interesting that my father, who I had an okay relationship with, but was going, well, that's what you are. You're just a salesman. And I really took affront with that and probably blocked that off for 10 years. And now here I am sort of later on in my career, I'm going, that is the one thing that I bring to a business. And it's interesting moving to more recently when I was down in New Zealand and was introduced to Mint Innovation, which is the cleantech business. The CEO said, one thing we don't have, Chris, we have 100 engineers and chemists, but we don't have great commercial capability. That's what you can bring. Who has a world view, who can understand that. And then the penny, you say, that's what
And businesses need somebody like you to survive, to be in business, because they can have a great product, they can have a great service, but without selling it, then they haven't got a business. So your skills, your strengths are so important and like pivotal to a business, and that's so important. So
I mean, look, it sounds like I'm blowing, my head's getting too big, but it's not. It's actually realizing what it is. Those values that you bring, being able to look at things maybe differently, especially if we're talking about pivoting in a second. But from a commercial point of view, to look not just in how much money are we making from the output of, I don't know, gold in whatever, how many dollars are we making? It's like, who are we going to partner with at the front end and the back end? Where are we going to get the feedstock? How are we going to build those relationships? How are we going to join the business together end to end to build a tangible business, which is then investable, people want to invest in? And that you've got to have that big picture. I can call it strategy, but it's also, strategy, but also making it work and pulling all that together and having the courage and having the confidence to go and make it happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Have you got any tips for somebody that maybe, we want to advise them to play to their strengths, but have you got any tips for someone that they're in a career, they're maybe doing really well, or they've got a business, but they don't know what their strengths are? Is there anything that you'd advise them to do to understand what they may be?
I probably just what I've touched on. It's have a real think as to what it is that you underneath, what is it that makes you tick?
Yeah.
I've done, you've done, and I'm sure a lot of, people who, you know, listening to this or in the future will say is like, we've all done psychometric, we've all done various tests, we've all done something, and we're good at this, we're not good at that, or whatever. But there are certain traits as to what we're particularly strong in, and I think we all know what they are. I mean, I am not great with a whole page of Excel spreadsheets. I'm just not, you know, it just doesn't interest me. But what I really, you know, I'm strong on, I've already said, is part, you know, relationships and building that relationship. And everyone's got that. So I remember having the same conversations a few years ago with my two sons who are now in business, or they've got their own careers. And it's like, well, what is it that how can you find that, what is it that we're going to focus on?
Yeah.
And I think you know, again, you have to think back as to what it is what you're interested in, what it is you're good at. So just play that, and it's not, I think it's always straightforward, but I think underneath everyone really knows it.
Yeah. And I think it's like where your energy goes, what you enjoy doing. Like you said, maybe when you've been, you know, in a role, you probably dreaded or not enjoyed the Excel part of it if you need to do Excel stuff. But then when it comes to meetings or actually kind of client engagements, or you've enjoyed that and you've kind of got energy from that. So it's where I suppose your energy draws you to as well, and how you enjoy spending your time.
Certainly, and I think early on in your career, especially, you know, I've had quite a few people who've worked for me over the years who I thought sort of right at the beginning going, they've got real potential. You know, I really think they're great, but they're often, not always, but sometimes they're in the wrong job.
Yeah.
They've always like put into a circle when they should be in another shape of sorts, you know. And I could think of 3 or 4 people who've worked for me, and we've got them into the right place, doing the right thing, and it's like putting flowers in water. It's like it's changed.
Yeah.
And
sometimes it takes that, doesn't it? Somebody doing it for, like you said, even that someone saying, "Oh, this is why we've hired you," but some like you with those 3 or 4 people. Putting them in the right place, and then they kind of flourished when they maybe weren't doing that so well in the other role, but you saw potential.
No, that's right. And you know, again, coming down to like, what is it I'm good at? What is it I really like? And some people say, I love it. I love numbers. I love doing stuff. I know lots of people like that, and it's like, that's fine. You carry on doing that, and that's fine.
Good,
but it's not my. But that's fine. Everyone's, and you know,
and we need that. We need different skills, don't we? If not, we'd all have to do everything, and maybe not be so good at everything. So we need people that love the spreadsheets, because not everybody, like you say, does.
Exactly. I just had a conversation yesterday about, you know, my own skill set, for example. I found I'm good at scaling businesses, and I've had a conversation about another business who are interested in using me to take me on to help them scale. And I said to them, look, I could take you so far, but after a certain point, I'm probably not the best person for what you want. So that point might be 2 years, like a CEO, whatever. I can take you up to 2 years, to the point, the inflection point. And when it becomes highly operational, and you're building this big plant, and you're like, I'd be a disaster. And so it's better to go, right, okay, I'll get you to this far. I could be an advisor, I can work with you, whatever. But when it comes to fitting all the pipes together and making this and that work and putting all that into it's like, it's not really what interests me. Other people do that better. And so already I know that is that area. So in order to help that business scale for the next 2 years, to take it through pre-seed, seed, and A round funding as a startup, that's great. But as soon as you start building a big plant and everything else, you need somebody else with a different set of expertise. And I think I realized that in myself.
Yeah.
Where you know, question is, where do you fit into that? Not you personally, Keisha, but you know, that person you're talking to. And
knowing that in yourself, and from my kind of recruitment days when I'd recruit for kind of CIOs and C-suite, I would always say that know where to position yourself. What do you want to be known for? Because if you're saying you want to be known for everything and you're too broad, you're going to find it hard to get those positions or get those opportunities. You need to know yourself, where you want to position yourself, and like you said, knowing yourself, knowing where you're good at, where your strengths are, because then also that company or that kind of business will then respect you to be like, okay, we can bring in Chris for this where 1 to 2 years, he'll get us to this stage, and then we'll look at the next person. We'll look at what kind of resource or support we need from there. So I think that goes a very long way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to say, I think if I look to myself further back in my career, I would go, I could do everything.
Yeah.
And it's only because you learn the hard way and you're
Yeah.
sitting there and you're going, I don't like this anymore, and I'm not very good at this anymore. And it's this business has moved on. A lot of early stage businesses change dramatically after maybe 2-3 years. It's not as fun as it was early stage. It's become too corporate. But it's also the people you have in there are probably not all of them, but some of them are not right for that business.
Yeah.
But that's period of time. Doesn't mean they're useless. They're just great early on.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And I see it quite a lot within people within their careers, but also business owners and founders that I work with. They feel that they need a clear plan to succeed. Would you say, I suppose, what is your view on that based on your experience and your knowledge now?
Are you meaning like a life plan, a career? It's like,
Yeah.
right, I'm going to go to fashion, and I'm going to be, I don't know, the CEO.
A clear, drawn out plan for their life, for their business. Obviously, you need some sort of plan, in my opinion. But what's your view on planning? Would you say smaller chunk, or what would you do even?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's good. It's a good question, and I you're probably not going to be surprised saying that I think if you're rigid all the way through, absolutely you've got to have a plan, and you should have a plan.
Yeah.
You know, it frustrates me. I think people who in their early career, or maybe even university, come out of university, I have no idea what I want to do, which is fine. Okay, go and try a few things.
Yeah.
But by that stage, I would like to think you get an idea of what you're good at and not so good at, and what you want to do, and whether you know, even from doing some part-time work, working at McDonald's or whatever, you like people or you don't like people. But I think to have a fixed career path is admirable. I can't think of many people I know, frankly, who are still doing the same thing they started off doing.
Yeah.
Some do, not many. And you have to constantly reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
So if you're going to reinvent yourself, especially as you get older, I mean, it's a really difficult problem. I mean, you know, after a certain age, and it's not that old, you know, there's a second phase of your life where people looked at very differently. In the first phase, where, you know, it's your early career, you're looked at differently within an industry. There are certain industries that are very ageist. And I think by having that, and you don't think of that at the age of 25, you're just like, I can take on the world.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're going to, old school, I know it's a bit like Mad Men, or I can't remember, there was some, anyway, but, you know, advertising in the old days, like people just lost their jobs at 40, and fashion is very similar. You just lose your job. And I think
that's awful, isn't it? Like, I know I probably know some of these things, or know there is that kind of that happens, but it's awful when hearing you say it like that.
Yeah, it's just horrendous. And you know, I know a lot of people who, you know, especially in marketing and advertising, who've just literally been thrown out, and they're just regarded as too old. And it's like, and then people just assume they're just too expensive or whatever.
Yeah, or they're set in their ways maybe from before, but they need to.
Exactly. You don't want somebody who's like my dad working for me. It's like, and it might be unspoken, but it's there.
Oh yeah, and I get that. So, what advice, I suppose, would you have for those people? I'm asking you another question on that, but those.
So no, I don't think there is a straight career path. I mean, I think that's the whole thing. I think you absolutely do the best you can. I mean, you know, do 10, 15 years or whatever it is, but that industry is going to change dramatically. And if you are able to change with it, that's great. And you can change and you can adapt. Within the fashion business that I was in, that it changed so dramatically with the arrival of the internet and online, that a whole new model was needed. And I can't remember on the day whether I literally sat down and thought, I have to move. But I realized that I was no longer relevant within the industry that I set out to be. And I wasn't to that stage. And so, no, I'm not sure. I think you're always going to have a passion about a certain thing.
Yeah.
But if I look, you know, as a bit of, you know, if I think from having started off in the fashion industry and here I am, you know, in the cleantech industry, it's like, I'm not even a chemist or, you know, an engineer.
Yeah.
But there is hope for everyone, and I think you've got to be. I think, yeah. I guess what I'm saying is you've got to be prepared to adapt and
Yeah.
be confident that you can adapt by playing to your strengths, and that's why it's important actually knowing what those strengths are.
Yeah, totally. And I think that whole key word there for me has been adaptable. And even with things like AI, that's kind of, now changing up the way a lot of work's been doing or changing things in general, we have to kind of embrace change, be able to learn to adapt, work with it, and kind of grow with change. And I think the people that maybe are reluctant to change or have got that fixed mindset are the ones that will probably struggle the most.
Totally agree. I mean, AI it fascinates me, and that whole, I use AI a lot.
Yeah.
It's not a question of people losing jobs to AI. It's
Yeah.
how you adapt AI to the way you work, and that's what I believe. There's space for all of us, and it's like, yeah, it's gonna change the way you work, but if you can make it work for you, much better. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
using some tools now that are unbelievable, but I've got friends who go, "Oh, it's just taking jobs away from everyone. It's useless," and it's like, well, you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, it's not going to work for you, or you're not interested in how AI admittedly, it has threats as well. There are threats there in how it is, but it also opens up a lot of opportunities,
Yeah.
and both for, I think, for how we all work, and in that respect, how do you work that out? How do you work out how to adapt to that, especially in the next 5-10 years or so? I mean, it's very different from being somebody my age or somebody who's in their 20s, but it's the same. We're still going to have to make it work for us.
Yeah, that's it. And I think whatever industry you're in, whatever job role you're in, whatever you do, AI will be there in some kind of shape or form, but it is about adapting. And even with what I do, I use it with kind of personal branding or kind of LinkedIn and outreach, that type of thing with clients, but it just means adapting to it. And also it means that more people may use AI for content, but also we still need to be human as well. So how can we use AI for certain things, but still being human by showing up, even things like this, being human, being visible is kind of key as well, because
Exactly.
you don't want to get lost into it all. And I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of scaling business, which obviously you've got experience with doing. So when you think about scaling business, what actually changes between early stage and real growth? So I know kind of you've mentioned where you would hand over, but what would you say changes between the early stage and real growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I moved to the Royal Mint,
Yeah.
and that was a very big pivot but there was one theme that was running through there, which is consistent, which is precious metals. So
Yeah.
whether it's jewelry, and gold is gold is gold. But I went and ran the precious metal division at the Royal Mint. And at that stage, it was totally fledged. I mean, it was nothing there. It was like literally a startup within the business. And what we had to do is build the foundations there. And okay, it's a well-established brand, but not within precious metals. It wasn't known within that. It was known as a company that made coins. And we had to build a new business fairly rapidly in order to keep the business in business, if you like, because people weren't using coins anymore. They were moving to digital. So it was a real challenge that business had, employing 2,000 or 1,500 people at the time. So for that, it was a real hockey stick because you had to get the foundations there first. And the foundations were looking at it as from a consumer level. For me, we had a wholesale and a consumer level. So it was almost going back to my roots in fashion. And it's like, right, okay, we've got consumers here. And what do we have? At Royal Mint, you have a brand that is well respected.
Yeah.
And because you're talking about an industry that was owned by the government. It's not actually it's a GovCo, which is a private company owned by the Treasury, but it was operating like a civil service organisation, and it was just a bunch of people going, "That's where we've done it for the last 50 years." 50 years, and I was like, "You've got to do it differently. We've got to do things differently." And we had to build a consumer-facing business, and we did that through an online business, just like that is substantial now by leveraging the Royal Mint brand, but also wholesale, in developing some products that you could develop overseas to represent the brand. So, and that's for investment. It's people to be confident about investing in the Royal Mint brand in gold and silver. And it was phenomenal. Just by building the foundation, though, you've got to be able to build that for that growth, because you know that if you hit it right, you're going to get a hockey stick growth.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it was just a 20 million, which, okay, it sounds a lot, but 20 million pound business. But in gold, that's not an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think this year, I can't remember the exact number, but it's way over $1 billion anyway.
Wow.
And I think by building those foundations and getting there, so something slightly less ambitious, or less scale, is the Mint Innovation business. So I was down in New Zealand 3 years ago and met the CEO of Mint Innovation. Complete coincidence being called Royal Mint and Mint Innovation, nothing to do with that.
Okay.
But the guy who is co-founder there, Will Barker, is a chemist from the UK, from Leicester Uni, and had built a strong business around e-waste recycling, using some smart chemistry microbes that eat into PCB boards. Are pretty cool, and got quite a bit of funding to build a commercial plant. Actually, prior to that, a demo plant and a commercial plant, scaled 120 million New Zealand dollars in growing that. And his view was like, look, Chris, I believe we can extend this technology into battery recycling. And I need somebody to go and validate that, and to go and build not just the commercial validation, but the tech. Do we have a market? And if so, who do we sell to, and how do we do it? And obviously, not being a chemist, I was like, needed a little bit of help. But cut a long story short, after 2 years, built up we're now in the state where we have built a consortium in the UK with Jaguar Land Rover and a couple of well-known other businesses in the UK to build that capability and to transfer that technology into the UK. So that is the early stage of that hockey stick. The hockey stick hasn't started yet, but what we're doing is building that framework to do it, because the world needs the technology of the whole battery ecosystem is a need, and for what's called supply chain resilience, in critical raw materials and all of those sort of things, which are really key to the infrastructure of the UK, for Europe and the US. And that scale up will also hockey stick in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm confident of that. But it's getting all of that in place to be able to do that, and to build those relationships, as I said, whether it's the JLRs of this world and other OEMs, but the supply and the feedstock. And you see, I'm passionate about it. It's a long way from selling raincoats, but it's again having that belief that you can do that. And so I'm very proud of having done that and taking that startup again into the next stage. Now it's becoming more operational. So from what I was saying to you earlier, it's not really my skill set operationally. So I'm not looking for my next thing, but it's certainly where I can pull those sort of skills together from a commercial level. It's been interesting. Cleantech is a totally new area for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everything you've managed to achieve there, but like you say, a lot of it, you're big on relationships and relationship building, goes such a long way, doesn't it, with everything we do. And I know you've mentioned it, and it's something that you and I have spoken about when it comes to relationship building, and obviously that's one of your key strengths. How much of the growth that you kind of achieved would you put down to relationships versus strategy? Have you got an opinion on that from kind of even your own experience and career?
I think you've got to have that. You've got to have that roadmap.
Yeah.
You've got to know where you're going. And if you don't have a roadmap, you don't know. There's the book I remember reading, it's like years ago. I think it was the 7 Habits or whatever. It's like, where do you put your ladder? Where are you gonna climb up? Because if you go put your ladder against the wrong wall, it's all going to go wrong. So what I would say is step back. What is your roadmap? Where are you going to go? And obviously you might have to go a slightly different route, but if you know what that vision is, the relationships are needed in order to get you there.
Yeah, definitely.
And the relationships are important, but unless you have the strategy, the vision, it ain't going to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah. This might sound like a bit of a silly question, but I'm going to ask it because I feel like people that are listening and watching may think it, and even I'm thinking it, to ask you, when it comes to relationship building or relationship management, what does that mean in terms of, have you got any tips of what's worked for you? Like, does it mean, like, for some people it may be kind of checking in every now and then, or some people it may be, I need to go see them face to face. What do you do to kind of build those relationships, and what's worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe strongly in face-to-face,
Yeah.
not all the time, but certainly where you can, and that's become less and less relevant where people hide behind the screens like we're doing here. We can't be everywhere. To actually go and spend an hour with somebody or a longer period of time, to fly across the world for an important meeting, not just to have a meeting, to go and do some beers, have a chat, find out a person. That is where you get the real, that really builds that relationship. I think also authenticity, being your real self, rather than just being in there, I'm going to get that sale, I'm going to do that. It's not me. It's like you're buying into the person, you're buying into the, it's more than that. The personal brand, you do personal branding.
Yeah.
It's like somebody says, so what is that phrase? It doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you do, it's the way you make people feel.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that empathy, if you can give that. And that's what I think is the most important. So building those relationships, you either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
it's like making the effort, isn't it? Like you said, it's not just always being behind the screen in your home office. It is getting, like, for me, some of the days that I come back with the most energy is when I've gone out to meet a client in person. We've gone even, like you said, for a coffee or lunch or a drink, whatever it may be. And then I find then after that, our conversations are so much, they're just different, aren't they? Because we've met, we've had time, like, you care about have they got a family, have they got children, have they got hobbies?
Little things. How's little Joey? Oh, he's great. Yeah. And it's, and I've found that's really useful because I speak German and French as well. And that's been really useful with and people go, well, who speaks German? But it's like, they do, when you go and work in the DACH countries, in Austria, Switzerland, Germany and France and elsewhere, you get a lot more respect, you get a lot more connection when you actually speak some language as well. But I think underneath, it's that being your authentic self. And I would be I talked about being a salesman, a commercial. I'd be a useless car salesman, absolutely useless, because you're not building a relationship.
Yeah, true.
If I had my life again, I probably, would go into something which you make lots of money now, enterprise sales or something like that, because you're building that long-term relationship. I don't know, but
I'm totally with you on those things, and I think it's like, for you doing it and people that do it then do it well, it is going that extra mile, making the effort, and like you said, being authentic, being genuine, and yes, we're all doing business of some kind, and that's that's what we're there in terms of for, but also we care about like caring about them as a person, and actually, like you said, sometimes having your walls a little bit down and being able to show who you actually are behind it as well.
Yeah,
I think it goes a long way. So we've got a little segment now called Brand Truth versus Brand Myth. So what I'll do is read out a few statements, and if you can just let me know your honest take on if you think they're a myth or a truth, and I suppose your reason why. So the first one is, having a clear, linear career path is essential for success. Is that a myth or a truth?
I would say it's a myth. I think you need a clear path at the beginning, but that path may change. You might not end up where you think you might not end up where you think you were going to at the beginning.
Yeah. And so it's a bit back to that thing that you said earlier, being able to be adaptable and pivot and
pivot if needs be. Problem with pivoting, as we've said, we haven't actually said, but it's all right pivoting, but the company who you're trying to pivot into will very often go, no, we just want somebody from that industry. You've got to have the confidence and the strength to challenge those. But if you want to pivot, it isn't straightforward. And I believe that sometimes, often, people from outside industry can see things in a completely different way, can really benefit the business, rather than somebody who's been there for 50 years or 10 years. So have confidence in that, be prepared to do that. But there's nothing wrong with, like, you have that clear path at the beginning. Just be prepared. It might not continue that way.
Yeah, definitely. So the second statement is, to scale a business, you need to stay within one industry. Is that a myth or a truth, in your opinion?
No, I think it's a myth, for the same reasons. Personally, I've done it myself. So, to go from fashion to precious metals to clean tech, clearly you can switch.
So this is more, I suppose, for where I was like, your opinion on is to scale a business. So let's say a business has works in an industry. Would you still say that's the same? So if you're working with a business to scale, would you tell them to work across multiple industries or different offerings? Or
no, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were no, I'd stick with what your capability is.
Yeah. And then I suppose at some point down the line, you could move into different things, but you need to get really good at one thing first, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the industry that I'm in at the moment, which is around batteries and all that clean tech, the ones that are failing are the ones who are trying to be all things to everyone.
Yeah, right, okay.
Rather than going, what is our core competency? What is it we're really good at?
Yeah.
And it might be X, whatever it is. I won't get too technical here, but whatever it is stick to that. Where are you on the value chain that you can really add value as a business, rather than trying to do it all? And that's what I think from a scaling.
Yeah. And statement 3 is, relationships drive more opportunities than strategy. Is that a myth or a truth, and why?
I haven't heard that myth. I haven't heard that one. I would go it's 50-50. You've got to have that strategy. You've got to have the strategy. But relationships, without the relationships, you're not going to go very far. But you can't just build it off relationships. You've
got to have something good to offer as well, I suppose. You can't just have a good relationship or a rubbish product.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've sort of covered it slightly earlier, but I really believe in having that. What is that route? What is that journey? And then your relationships on that.
Yeah. And the last one of these is, you should only say yes to opportunities that match your experience. Is that a myth or a truth?
No, I just don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all, because you don't know what's going to. Some people might look at you in a different way, and that's what it had suddenly happened with me. People looking at you when I went to the Royal Mint, I honestly couldn't understand why anyone was interested in me, because having come from some very sexy, cool brands, Royal Mint certainly didn't come under that category, but they saw me as bringing a skill set that was completely different. So. I think, I don't know if that's answered your question, but it's
that has
on that,
And I see it quite often but people wouldn't see it like that, or people that maybe struggle with imposter syndrome, or they think, oh, I can't go for that, I'm not quite ready for that, or that's not my experience, and then they end up saying no, or thinking, no, I'm not going to bother even applying for that opportunity, because they just think they can't do it. Whereas actually, a lot of the times now, things are so adaptable, like things are changing so quickly. So my take on that as well would be, go for it, because you'll learn a lot. And they've clearly seen something in you that they like. So go for it. So my last question for you today, Chris, has been great. So thank you so much for joining me. But if you could go back to the very start of your career, what would you say to that version of yourself now?
Well, and my wife, I'm sure she'll be looking at this some stage in the future. She would smile at this, but probably my second half of my career has been far more rewarding than my first half. And I have had a far more not exciting time, but I feel I've got far more rewarding personally. But there is a reason for that. And like a lot of things, self-confidence. And it probably surprised you and others that, when I left school, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. I had a bit, but I was like underneath lack of confidence, because I have dyslexia. Actually, I have a dyslexia of numbers. And I found that really difficult at school. And I was called, I'm not joking, that's back in the day when, I was just called thick. And
it's horrible. Yeah.
It was terrible, but that's what it was. And so I just grew up with that I had to struggle. I was always struggling in class. I failed all my exams. I couldn't pass various exams. And as a consequence, I didn't sort of go the route. I was always sort of side route of, well, you can't go off to uni because you won't pass anything. And so I came out of school, a good school, had a good education, but with that sort of lingering thing that I'm not much good for very much. And I'm not going to get. So it took me, I would say, 5, maybe 10 years to sort of build up that confidence, and for somebody else to go, do you know, you're really good at this?
Yeah.
Because it was like, really? You know, sort of, because
you got that recognition of like you're good.
And I found that the dyslexia of numbers, I always forget the word for it, but I found I've got a coping mechanism as to how to resolve that. So I'm actually very good with numbers. I'm good with, you know, whether it's looking at a balance sheet, finances, or whatever, absolutely fine. It's probably why I don't have a big thing for spreadsheets.
Yeah, that makes sense now.
You know? And it just comes, I didn't realize that. I seriously didn't know that until my own son was sitting there at the age of 5, and his teacher said, well, he's got dyslexia. It runs in the family. Have you got it? And it's like, well, hang on a sec. All right, not so great myself, you know. And that was like, so if I go back to my childhood, I go back to my early career, there's nothing I could do about it. But now at least people, you know, are able to address that early on, and dyslexia then was ADHD of now. It's real. I still have it. You know, I get a password. I always seem to get it wrong. Unless I write it down completely. So that was something from when I was younger, but I can't really, you know, and as a consequence, my career was probably a little slower to start off with. And I didn't go through those business. I should have gone to business school. I should have done that, whatever. And so I just learned from mistakes. But you know, as I think my wife will say, and my kids, it's like, you haven't done too well. You haven't done too badly anyway.
Yeah, you've done amazing.
And so that younger self was a very different person.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing I could give advice on anyone. It's just
a reflection. Yeah.
Front and dyslexia. And it's funny when Donald Trump was not so funny, but Donald Trump sort of saying to Gavin Newsom, you know, he's sort of almost remedial because he has dyslexia. It's just insulting the way people sort of approach.
Yeah, I was going to say that it is spoken about more now as well, isn't it? And especially in like schools and education, that it's kind of realizing where maybe someone has additional needs, and not everyone is the same.
No.
Whereas I think before it wasn't really. It was like you said, you know, you're not very good at that, or you're thick, which is awful for them to say. But it is kind of now. Hopefully, there's more to be done, that not everyone is the same, and actually we need people not to be the same or be good at certain things and not good at others, because if not, we'll all literally be the same and do the same.
Exactly. So you look, I'm not putting a dampener on it. It certainly hasn't stopped me at all, and it's been fantastic, particularly the last 20 years or so. You know, having lived in 6, I can't even remember, it's 6 or 7 countries, but experiencing those. And some of it's by choice. Some, you know, if you have a partner, you know, their career is important too. So that's how we ended up down in New Zealand. So it's not always led by one, but you know, it's sort of like take the opportunities and see where it goes. I have my two sons. One lives in Sydney and the other lives in Zurich. And I remember them asking, you know, years ago,
they've got it from you then, being in different
places.
How
do I do this? And they go, well, just go with the opportunity.
That's a good advice.
Go with see where it goes,
and be open-minded to it as well, like you've done. Is like be open-minded and say yes, and then figure it out after, and enjoy.
Nothing's easy. I mean, we all think, and you'd know this from your recruitment, we all think we're great at change.
Yeah,
we all think we're amazing. Yeah, we'll adapt to change. I'm useless at it. You know, because suddenly you find those little things that you're used to, you find quite difficult to adapt to. You change pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know, we're not. And so, you know, moving around the world, doing different things is challenging, but it can be unbelievably rewarding. And just follow the opportunities, follow the change. But most of the population live within 20 or 30 miles of where they were born. So they want to take that jump.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thanks for joining me. It's been amazing having you on, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else that does listen will as well. If people want to connect with you when they do listen, is it best to connect with you on LinkedIn, or is there another way that you want people to connect?
Just LinkedIn's fine. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Chris Howard should be on there. If you've got any,
and I'll tag you as well.
Okay, should be there anyway. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And for those that are listening and that will be listening, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time for Brand and Becoming. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, Guy. Bye.